Welcome to Philanthropy in Action, where we uncover the wonderful stories of people who give their time, talent, and treasure to change the world. These are stories of philanthropy. I'm thrilled to have Mimi Gardner Gates here with us today. Mimi, thank you so much for coming.
Delighted to be here.
We also have our brilliant and dedicated Yale students participating in the conversation. Students, please introduce yourselves. Linda?
Hi, my name is Linda. I am a junior history major at Yale, and I was born in Shanghai, China.
Hi, I'm Michael Schulzen. I'm a senior religious studies major from Chattanooga, Tennessee.
Hi, I'm Stephen Banks. I am a senior computer science major from Detroit, Michigan.
Hi, I'm Leslie Bull. I'm a junior political science major studying international development, and I'm from Arlington, Virginia.
Hi, my name is Robert Dzicznicki. I'm a freshman computer science major from New York City.
Thank you. Mimi Gardner Gates is a philanthropist and a scholar of Asian art. She has been curator and donor at the Yale University Art Gallery and the Seattle Art Museum. She's now involved in an exciting project in the Dunhuang Buddhist Caves in the Chinese Gobi Desert. Her influence has been significant in the art philanthropic sector and elsewhere. She also serves as a trustee of Yale University. Mimi, my first question is, how did you get involved first in philanthropy? Did you go to a religious school as a child?
No, I didn't. And actually, growing up, the one fact was that my father's company had a small foundation, and it was a family foundation. So I knew that they gave scholarships. But then, after I got into college, and then I was working full-time and going to school full-time to get a graduate degree at Yale. And actually, I was here for 25 years. Some people said it took you that long to finish. But it was actually a church where I first gave my money. With somebody from the church in New Haven asked me if I would give, I think, $10,000 for a capital campaign. And I agreed, but I was a friend. And that started me thinking. And then afterwards, when I moved to Seattle and to direct the Seattle Art Museum, but when I became a part of the Gates family, the whole cultural philanthropy, I mean, it just, even though we all give separately, but it becomes certainly ingrained in you.
Right. That aspect has been a recurrent theme with our guests, in which you asked Julian Bond, how did you start? You asked Harry Belafonte how you start. And you asked Donald Dubinsky how you start. And they said, because someone asked me. Do you think that was the catalytic moment?
Absolutely. And, you know, thinking back on it, that's when I personally first became interested in giving and realized that what a gift to me it was.
Is there a difference? You actually said that, but is there a difference in how you feel when you were making decisions by yourself, or was your family involved? And now that you are part of the Gates family, has that changed how you think about what you do?
Well, I think it's sort of a complicated question. Growing up, my family was really not very philanthropic. My father was very cautious, his father growing up during the Depression, and it was only this corporation foundation that gave really small scholarships. And we still do, and it's my one connection with my cousins. But after moving to Seattle, and also at that time, my parents created a foundation, and they gave each of us a certain amount each year to give away in our communities. That made me start really thinking about what I was going to do. And then with the Gates family, even though my giving is separate, and so is my husband's, and our finances are separate, so mine's kind of mild by comparison, or modest by comparison to other members of the family. I think, you know, we talk about it a lot, and talk about, you know, what you're giving to, what you're assessing, and how. And then the foundation, the Gates Foundation, started in our basement, and Bill and Melinda suddenly decided that they that they really wanted to give. But they were both working full-time at Microsoft. And so Bill's dad, whose first wife had passed away, and then we were together, he offered to help. And so one day we looked downstairs, and the largest foundation in the world was in our basement. And there were 3 people working for it. Wow, what's that? Anyway, now there are 1,000 people working for it. And they've built 2 huge buildings in Seattle, and it's a major, major concern. But I think it's so important in terms of a fully lived life to really think about philanthropy and to really see, I mean, what can you do for your community? What can you do for the world? How do you make a difference? And philanthropy is a really key part of that.
Now, before I go to our students, how did that change your personal relationship? Did it change at all? Because now your husband became one of the 3 trustees, or 2 at that time, of the entire, or was he the only trustee of the foundation at that time?
Actually, Bill and Melinda make the decisions. And my husband sits in on a lot of them. And Warren Buffett gave his money, and Warren Buffett is now a trustee. But Bill and Melinda, I think, are really the ones who are making and decide on the major buckets of giving.
Let's start with Linda.
Hi. Well, we in our class are nearing the phases of deciding which organizations we're going to donate to, and you have plenty of experience in doing that. One of my top concerns is how to manage risk. So in the field of philanthropy, maybe even more so than the field of business, many individuals and NGOs face failure in actually accomplishing their goals. How, when you give your money, do you assess these risks and take these risks into account when you donate?
I think you have to be willing to fail. And I'm a great believer, no matter what you're doing, that it's important to be bold and take risks. And to allow organizations that are doing it. But you really, in looking at an organization and how you're going to give your money away, you have to evaluate, are they going to do a good job? Are these people who know how to manage the organization, do they know what they're doing? And do you feel comfortable making a commitment? But I still think you have to, that it's worth it taking risks. And actually, when Warren Buffett spoke to Bill and Melinda, one of the famous things he said is, don't just go to safe places, really tackle tough issues. And if you're going to tackle tough issues, you've got to take risks. So, what's your passion?
Well, one of the organizations that we're thinking about is called Mycelium School, and it is an organization, well, it is only just beginning, and the founder believes that in our current model for education today, we don't have enough emphasis on action, on actually doing things, putting our learned knowledge into action. So he wants to incorporate that into the field of social enterprise and create a school based on that philosophy. But it's never been done before. We don't know the person personally, and it's just, I think it's very hard to assess the success rate of an individual that we've never met. But I think if I were, single-handedly making the decision in the class, I would love to be able to give Mycelium School a chance.
Mm-hmm. Can you interview him on Skype?
We probably can. We would definitely try to do that, yeah. What would be some of the questions you would ask him?
Oh, I guess, what is his approach? How does he go, what is his strategic, does he have a strategic plan? Does he have a 3-year strategic plan? Is he looking long term? How does he see it evolving? Who are the other investors? Is he investing in it?
Mm-hmm.
How much weight do you put on the idea versus the talents of the person who's supposed to execute the idea?
I think I probably weigh them equally. The idea usually gets you involved, but the talents really, having strong management is really critical. Having somebody who really knows how to think and to act and to really move a project forward.
Would you agree with this statement? One of the things that you said, it seems radical, which is You have to be willing to take risks. You have to be willing to fail. And where I see it's not radical is from people who come out of a culture of innovation, people come out of technology. And so when we hear of people who have created great wealth in the technology sphere, they say similar things to what you just said. That is so important that if you're going to have an outlier response, you have to be willing to take risks, you have to be willing to fail. Or scientists say that you have to, it's not a negative thing, you just exclude that it's information, you exclude that. But when you speak to other philanthropists who have been around in a more traditional or in an inherited wealth sort of context, there's a different level of timidity. And it's as if you get defunded if you fail because you should have all succeeded. But with the world's complex problems, I don't understand why your point of view isn't winning out over the other point of view. Because if you're not being innovative and willing to fail and fund people who are failing, you're not going to change the world.
I think it's really critical that you be willing to. I don't think of myself as a philanthropist. You know, I have lots of passions, and as an art museum director and other things. Although, you know, the family is everybody is a philanthropist to some degree. But in the art museum world, I tell people you've got to take risks, and you've got to be bold. And I think no matter what you do in life, really taking risks, and when an opportunity presents it, seizing it and going with it is important. And I think in philanthropy, you have to be willing to let people fail.
Michael.
Thank you so much for coming. It's great to have you here.
Fun.
So one of the premises of this class is the idea that a donor has taken $100,000 and allowed 25 different people to sort of make this decision rather than centralizing that decision with a single person. And I'm curious, what sort of, you're close to a foundation which is in many ways one of the most centralized giving sort of operations in the world. And I'm curious, what do you think? What are the advantages of having such a sort of a centralized model versus a more diffused, giving a lot of people the money to then give away type of approach?
Well, somehow you have to reach a focus.
Right.
And so I'm sure, I mean, how have you all been able to reach a focus?
We'll ultimately find that out on Monday. I mean, I think that's something that we're processing a lot.
There are a lot of passions going on right now.
That's what we're trying to figure out. I mean, it's very difficult.
I make decisions by myself, which I like, and not by committee. The foundation, they now are very targeted. You know, they have global health,
right.
They have global development, and in the U.S. education. And then Northwest Giving is a small piece, and libraries are a small piece.
Okay.
You probably have read about it, so.
Yeah, so there's different parts to that. But the ultimate, you were saying that the ultimate decision kind of comes down to...
Bill and Melinda...
Or do they delegate? Right. Yeah.
Do, but they read avidly.
Okay.
Young Bill, he reads voraciously, and he has a memory where he never forgets.
Okay.
And it could be HIV/AIDS, it could be osteoporosis, all these different things. He actually he'll on vacation take 14 books.
Wow. Okay.
And they're not books, not fiction that I would read. And he really learns about it. And he also hires people who are the best experts in their field.
Okay.
And it's really worked. And they had somebody in education. They weren't keen. It was on dividing large high schools into small high schools.
Right, yeah.
And they really decided that was not the best strategy, so they turned it over. They actually hired somebody new, and now they have different strategies.
Okay.
So, I mean, being willing to adapt and maintaining flexibility is really important. But it's interesting as to how 25 of you, how you come to a decision you're all happy with. And, that encompasses, so do you put it in different buckets? How are you dividing it up?
Well, at the moment, we divide it into 3 focus groups. There's a global health group, a poverty alleviation group, and a social justice group. So that gave us at least somewhere to start on focusing which organizations we might want to consider funding. And now we're trying to narrow it down to a top list of ones that we're really passionate about, and then from there, the debating starts.
Mm-hmm. So it's interesting also what you're not including.
Yeah.
So, for me, the arts are really vital. And I'm going to just read you a quick quote, which actually comes from Michelle Obama, which the arts are not just a nice thing to have or to do if there is free time or if one can afford it. Rather, painting and poetry, music and fashion, design and dialogue, they all define who we are as a people and provide an account of our history for the next generation. And I think the arts, in terms of enabling us to explore who we are and who other people are, that they really also free you up to look at the world in different ways and to see different worlds. And also cultural organizations, many people assume that ticket sales pay for the entire organization, which is not true. And what do those organizations mean to community? And that's something to think of. And it may not affect you right now, but when you live in a community, think about what the arts and culture mean. You know, can you imagine Paris without the Louvre, New York without the Metropolitan? But these organizations, and it's the same thing for symphony orchestras, for everything, almost all of them had some meaningful impact on our lives, and to keep them going, it's worth thinking about some piece of philanthropic giving. Anyway.
Well, one of the exercises that they're now going through, you know, they're only 2 days away from their decision making, is that they came up with their own priority areas that Leslie just enumerated. And they're designing their own metrics. But in response to what you said, one of the things that is part of their exercise is we left, and Donna Dubinsky suggested this, that you leave money aside, sort of discretionary, because you can get rigid in your formulation, and that having that discretionary money allows you to then think outside the box of what you've confined yourself, that there are other things that you think about, relationships, there are passions that aren't justified in some metrics way, but deserve to be funded.
Some of the most meaningful giving that I've done has just been something that hit me personally. One is a Chinese calligrapher who lives in New Haven, who's 99 years old, one of the best artists. I mean, one of the best Chinese calligraphers alive. Not just female calligraphers, but one of the best calligraphers alive. And one thing I did was I was able to preserve a core of her work in the Seattle Art Museum. And that actually was through my own giving, which it came from a very deep personal connection. And to me, that was incredibly rewarding.
Stephen?
So to continue on this line, we found that it's reasonably simple to compare two organizations that are in the same sector. So if we have two organizations looking to fight malaria in Africa, we can look at which one is more effective. But we're having a much harder time comparing organizations that are very different, given that the class as a whole doesn't have a set of first principles that we're trying to fulfill. Do you have any advice as to how we can compare funding education in India with fighting discrimination in New Haven with stopping malaria in Africa? How can we compare those organizations?
I don't know. I guess if it was me, I would probably divide it up, say I want to do a third here, or something, a quarter and a half, or do something. I think it's hard to compare organizations across who have completely different missions, unless how meaningful are they? And I tend to give from my passion. So, but with a group in giving, I would divide it up by percentages. I don't know. It's kind of crazy, but I think it's really hard to compare.
Well, you also have to weigh whether, if you divide it up by equal percentages, but you have less interesting organizations who can capture a larger proportion of the money because it's a third, but you have incredibly good organizations, but in one category, they're fighting over that same third. So part of the flexibility was to allow nimbleness.
I think that's good.
But also the frustrations related to that.
So do you have passionate arguments? Do you disagree?
So I find myself passionate about trying to maximize impact or goodness, full stop. And it seems that the way to do that is through global health. That's the most obvious way to effectively create good outcomes, saving lives, preventing suffering, and so forth. And this differs from the passions of other members of the class, many who are interested in helping the local community or in promoting education. And I don't know if I'm leading toward a question here, but these are the troubles that we're facing, I guess. Many people have not just, it's not that there's just a set of people in the class who are passionate about global health and a set who are passionate about education. Even within the group of people who support global health, they may be they may be supporting that category for different
obviously
reasons.
you don't want to divide it up into too many
Right.
into too many grants, but somehow being able to convince the others to come to a conclusion in terms of rankings.
Right.
That to me would be, what's the priority? But it's hard. I mean, global health. The Gates Foundation is every human being, every person has the right to live a healthy, productive life, is the mission statement. And having traveled in Africa and India and different places, seeing the work that it really is incredibly meaningful, and I can easily understand. But or do you do international, national, and local? I mean, that's a different way of doing it.
Sure.
Well, one of the things that Stephen often brings up is it is easier to measure one's success with mosquito nets or pills and distribution than it is to measure some of the more amorphous social change, systematic problems that people would like to address. And so justifying investing in social change or in art versus investing in something that you could actually count, how many mosquito nets you gave out, how many kids actually got saved versus last year, is an easier process. How do you convince one or the other if that's what you're looking for?
I think you have to look across categories. Certainly, I just got a request yesterday from the UN for $10 per bed net, or
they're overcharging you.
Huh?
They're overcharging you.
There you go.
We've studied. These guys are talented. They've done an incredible amount of research.
So how much should a bed net cost?
$4 to $5.
Yes.
There you go. And what organization is the best at doing it?
Against Malaria Foundation.
Do you agree with that, Leslie?
The Against Malaria Foundation might be best at distributing bed nets. Whether they're best at fighting malaria, I don't know if I agree.
Who would you suggest?
I think the Against Malaria Foundation does a really good job, but they're focusing on a very different part of the fight against malaria than the Against Malaria Foundation is.
And Malaria No More is.
Yes. I mean,
And the fact is, even if you gave the whole grant, the $100,000 that you're giving away, all to this, how much effect?
Well, you would save a quantifiable number of lives that otherwise wouldn't be saved, even if you're not stopping the problem.
But I think you still have to look at other parts of human existence. It can't just be that. I don't know. That's my own passion, is that social change, and there are other things that affect people's lives as well.
Leslie, do you agree with this?
I agree. I mean, my personal preference would be to have some sort of combination between something where you can very easily say, we definitely saved this many lives with this much money. That's not where I would put all of our funds, because I agree with you that there's a lot more to human existence that's important. But for something with a donation as small as ours, I'm perfectly comfortable with donating some part of it to something more quantifiable that we can say.
Now you get a chance to ask your question.
Okay. My question is taking this in a slightly different direction. So as part of the Yale Corporation, I'm sure you're aware of the power of having just Yale's name associated with something. And we've talked about this a fair amount in class regarding some of the organizations that want a smaller amount of money, or that maybe we can't fund at all. And I was wondering if you think there's any value in, say, publicly supporting an organization, but only with the Yale name, if we can't give money to everyone?
I think it depends what the organization is, and if it is it going to make a positive difference. And if it is, then, I think I would think that would be great.
Do you think that would be more salient with a local New Haven organization rather than abroad?
Probably.
Okay, that's good to know.
Yeah. But I think from the time when I lived in New Haven, I think it's really terrific what Yale and the community and the coming together is much more powerful than it was when I was here several decades ago. But I think there are a lot of really great organizations in New Haven helping people in lower income and educational organizations, and I think those are worthwhile. Are you thinking of giving to anything local?
We are. There are several under consideration right now.
Yeah, I think it'd be great. I do quite a bit, some in Seattle, and I do some in the Gobi Desert. So,
how do you respond to build on Leslie's question when the person who wants the grant says to you, the money would be great, but even if you give me something nominal, just to say that you recognize me, so that I have Mimi Gates's brand as part of the award, this positions me in a better way to negotiate with other donors and funders because you gave me an investment. Do you weigh the brand that you lend to a potential grantee as well as the possible investment?
Yeah, I think it's just, I like the idea of if I believe the organization's the cause is meaningful, then I like the idea of having, but to divide things up into too many little pieces, I don't believe in doing that. I believe making choices, even if they're difficult choices. I like it when a name helps leverage other gifts. I like giving money and asking for a match. I think that, and that recently happened to me with the Gobi Desert. And it was for conservation, which is a really important cause, is how do you preserve these caves, and training Chinese conservators to do wall painting conservation. And so I met with the man and I said, if you give, X number, I will match you. And he said, fine, I'll match you.
We had that experience right here with someone in your seat. Jesse Fink and his wife Betsy, who were here, who founded Priceline.com, liked the idea of one of the organizations that was under consideration called Whole Wave, which deals with organic food and farms. And he was talking about, since both he and she had gone to forestry school, that this was something that was appealing to him. And so I said, one of the metrics the class looked at was, can the organization leverage the gift? And he said, okay, I'll match whatever. I'll match what you give.
There you go.
And immediately, and then we've had...
So is that on your list?
Of metrics?
Yeah, definitely.
How much do you really muscle people to give? So, for example, in the Gobi Desert, it's an amazing and important undertaking, but say this class didn't have art as one of its priority areas, or culture as part of its priority areas. How do you broaden that conversation with potential donors who don't operate in that space? And this would be a new wave and a new category.
Yeah, I talk about what it means to humanity in terms of history, of cross-cultural connections. And I think you just, whatever it is, you talk as passionately as you can about what the cause is. And the caves in Dunhuang, because they're singular. They preserve a whole history of the Silk Road in greater richness and greater depth than any other site. So I try and convey my passion, but I don't expect everybody else to share it. Yeah.
Do you ever have to battle with people who would like a quid pro quo, who say, well, I'll support you if you support me?
I think I'm modest enough that it doesn't affect me so drastically.
Uh-huh.
So, but certainly, And I'll tell you, when I was director of the Seattle Art Museum, I made a passionate case for the arts all the time because I had to fund that institution. So I did, and in terms of the muscling was probably much heavier than it is now, even for the Dunhuang Caves, which are my primary focus.
Robert?
Well, I kind of wanted to take the discussion in a slightly different direction and
Sure.
ask you how about your work in different philanthropic spaces, because you've worked a lot in the arts, and that you said that's what you're really passionate about. I was wondering how your work in the arts, which you said it's important to be very risk-taking in, informs your work with, say, with the Yale organization.
With the Yale organization, with
Like, yeah,
the Yale Art.
with Yale Arts and different and education on campus.
So with the Yale Art Gallery, I just having been director a long time ago, etc. I have tried to fund there as well to balance that, which I don't consider so risk-taking, but what I have looked at is Asian art. I think whatever you are involved in personally, following your personal passion is really important. And I gave some thought to what degree does your personal career influence that? And art does, and Yale does, and I'm indebted to Yale. I want to give back for what they gave to me over the time I was here. And so Asian art was my passion, so actually doing something for Asian art to encourage the display and study of it, but particularly for teacher and student exhibitions. So that's what interested me. But I balance that with the Northwest African American Museum, which is a startup. And one thing that fascinates me, and I could be of help to them because they've been in the museum field. And so this museum started up from nothing. And it went through some painful growing pains where actually it was poorly run. When they built a building and the person who was in charge, anyway, it went over budget and got out of hand a little bit. So had to help pull it down again. And now, I was instrumental in getting a change in leadership, and it's doing beautifully. So that also is. I don't know if I have any specific risk-taking at Yale, but the arts at Yale are something that is a real gift in terms of the richness and the distinguished, the collections as well as the study of the arts here in the professional schools.
The way that we frame philanthropy is time, talent, and treasure.
Mm-hmm.
You have clearly merged your talent, which is you're a scholar of Asian art, you know this field, with your philanthropic, with your treasure. When you think of this, if we went sort of high up into the ear without the specifics, and you think about advising folks who tie a potential grantee to certain deliverables or to a certain vision, but don't have that expertise. Do you lean in a certain way, which is when you have the talent to actually use that talent with your philanthropy, when you don't have the talent but think you have the talent? I
try to recognize I don't have the talent. But I think I look at several buckets. One is art, and that's probably more prominent for me than a lot of people. But I think it really isn't important in terms of who we are. And then I have another bucket that's education. Heritage University is out in the Yakima Valley in Washington. 90% of the children come from families where no one's ever been to college. 50% Hispanic, 20% Native American. And it's in a huge agricultural valley, and there are no other schools around. And a lot of the people who go there have to work and even have families and children, so they really struggle. So I was just out there recently, and that to me is in the education department. And with my time, I volunteer at Head Start. So 3- and 4-year-olds are fun. And you don't have to plan, you don't have to worry, it doesn't take a lot of brain power. But I found a teacher in Head Start who I really like, and so, I do that. Environment, I am more and more concerned about environment. The kind of climatic chaos we're all experiencing, I think, just underlies that. And in the Northwest, environment is very prominent. So, and that's something the Gates Foundation doesn't do, but it's something that has become increasingly important to both, actually, my husband and me. So we're doing more in that department. And I'm trying to think. So, and humanitarian service, so human services. I think being a woman influences me in terms of really caring about women who are living on the streets, and children, and homelessness, and domestic violence, and all of this. And I do that in the community in Seattle with the YWCA, because they do transitional housing, they help to get people up to self-supporting, they have a women's shelter, and that's what I do in that department. So I sort of do these 4 buckets. I don't necessarily decide I'm going to spend so much money or percentages on each one, but I think of it in those categories.
There's something about your character that's coming across that I find exciting and part of a type. So there's a quote that resonates with me, but sounds very much that it would be in keeping with you. And so my question is, will this be in keeping with you? Which is a quote from Winston Churchill, in which he said, "Success is going from failure to failure, but with enthusiasm." Mm-hmm. Do you find that your enthusiasm carries some of the water in these philanthropic exercises? And part B of that question is, do you personally get something out of being engaged with your time and talent and treasure, as well as, of course, the impact you're making by investing such time, talent, and treasure?
Oh, on the last question, I think there is absolutely no question. That I'm sure. Have you all found that? Yeah. I mean, are you? It'll be interesting to see once you make the decisions, right? Right now, you're probably preoccupied with how are we going to make this happen? What are we going to do? Is the cause I really care about, is it going to win? How much are we going to give to it? And those things. As I've gotten older, it's one of the great pleasures of my life, is being in a position where I can give back. And I think that's, it's such, here, going to Yale, having a life that's been blessed in many ways, is being able to give back and to do some great things, and some of them unexpected. And to me, I love spending the time and thinking about giving and spending the time volunteering. So it's almost a profession now, which I like. All right, on the enthusiasm. Yes. Yeah. Convince each other with your passion. I mean, don't. I think don't be afraid to express it and be enthusiastic. And I think that's so true in whatever you do in life. Is to really express yourself and express your passion.
Final question. It's fascinating when you read some of the earlier philanthropists, like The Gospel of Wealth by Carnegie, and folks who wrote something that sounds so different than what people say today, with some notable exceptions. And what they write is, when they have accumulated capital and they've been incredibly successful as capitalists, it's not their money. They say, we're conduits. We have had special skills and gifts that allowed us to create great wealth. And so but our duty is to return it back to society. Yet, for a lot of people in this particular moment, which is also a sort of a new Gilded Age, people say, it's my money. I should be able to do what I want with it. And what do you think of that conversation? Because you are engaged in a certain, at least some conversation with great wealth.
I just think that, I think far too much in the United States today, people think about themselves and think about things that, to me, and yes, you've earned the money, but think about community and think about other people and think beyond yourself. And how can you make a difference in the world? I mean, how can you, and there's so much that needs doing, and you have the means to do it, and you have the intelligence too, that when you get out, when you graduate and you go out, you can use your intelligence to make something great happen. And it doesn't have to be in terms of money and how much you make. It can also be in the nonprofit world, or you can make money and give it away. But I think far too many people, I think of it as being selfish instead of giving it away. I wanted to cite one quote,
sure,
which is Katharine Graham, who said, "To love what you do and know that it matters, what could be more fun?" And she did it when she broke the glass ceiling, and about what really inspired her being in the publishing world when she never thought she could do it. And wasn't necessarily about philanthropy, but I think, to love what you do and know that it matters, what could be more fun. And philanthropy is really fun. It's hard work, and if you get it in a big way, you've got to evaluate and assess and do all those things, but it's fun. And think of it that way.
Thank you so much, Mimi.
Well, I hope it was helpful.
It was incredibly helpful. And thank you so much, students. We have been inspired with Mimi Gates's enthusiasm and the fun that she has in being philanthropic and engaging in exciting projects that are moved by your passion. Now, what are you going to do to change the world?